Hi, and welcome to If These Heels Could Talk. Yeah. I'm JoyGenea with Solutions by JoyGenea.
And I'm Michelle with Bad Cat Digital. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, Michelle, what are we talking about?
We're referencing a late 90s movie. So anybody younger than anybody under the age of probably 35 will have to look this up. But
or their parents will have already shown it to them.
Right. Hopefully, if they're good.
Yes.
Good parents. So we're going to be talking about a scene from Office Space. And it's the scene Jennifer Aniston. It's a scene where Jennifer Aniston is a server at a restaurant, kind of like a TGI Fridays. It's intended to be kind of like but obviously they're not going to violate trademark for this low budget movie.
Exactly.
So, Jennifer's boss is telling her that he wants her to have more pieces of flair. And flair is referred to the little buttons and little things that are on her suspenders as part of her work uniform. And Jennifer says, I have the requisite amount of flair. I have the flair that you require me to have flair. I have flair. It's done. Mm-hmm. And her supervisor is like, but look at that employee over there. He has twice as much flair. Mm-hmm. And so what we're thinking about and what we're talking about is flair as a construct for culture. Flair as a construct for employee attitude, I guess is what you would say. And attitude is something that a lot of people put on their review forms. Attitude is something that, and it's really difficult to quantify. So then you end up with corporate quantifications like how many pieces of flair I should have.
Which I want to point out on the flair thing, if you want to Google it or learn a little bit more,
right.
It was a thing.
It's totally a thing.
It totally represents something that was happening at that time.
Right.
There were many.
I honestly have not been to that particular restaurant in probably 2 decades. Yep. So I'm not 100% sure if it's not still a thing.
Right.
But I know this. I know that there's conflict when a leader expects somebody to embody an attitude, and the person who they're talking to does not understand that this requirement is about attitude and not the requirement itself. And so the conversation is really interesting because he's trying to say something that he just doesn't know how to say, which is you are not the personality that we want to represent this brand. And I need you to be that personality. And she's very rightly doesn't know what to say in that. She's like, that's not who I am. So ultimately, it's about fit and culture and all of these things, but these are very difficult things to quantify.
And expectation.
Yes.
I would totally add into their expectation.
And assumptions.
Yes, because he had an expectation and an assumption. You work here, so thereby you want to have 80 pieces of flair. You want to be a twice as much, 30 kind of flair person. Yeah. And it's like, no, I'm going to do 15.
You told me to do 15. I pulled 15 out of the bucket. Right. What do you want from me, man?
Which, if he was a decent manager, told him the person, an employee that she is, she's going to hit the minimum, but she's showing up.
Yeah.
So that's what you're going to get from that employee.
But I would actually argue that it's not, because she's not a minimum employee. In the context of the story, that's not what she is. She's just not that person.
Right.
So she wants to go to work, do her job, and go home. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I really don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Not only is there not something wrong with that, you need those employees.
Yeah.
Like, that's the important part. Kim Scott talks a lot about that. If you read any of her books, about leadership and stuff, she talks about the fact, because she had some real judgment.
Well, that's the
people
thing.
that weren't 30 flair kind of people,
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if she doesn't want to make her job's waiting tables at this restaurant a core part of who she is and her identity, I think that's okay.
Why would you not?
Well, it's true though. It's true. For some people, work is the thing that enables their life. And for other people, crazy people like me, our work is our life.
That's why we run businesses. Like, that's why we want to
but we chose that. Bucket. Like, we chose that. And maybe knowingly and maybe not, but
and maybe it's just part of who we
and maybe sometimes we make that choice every day. Yeah. Every day I wake up, I make that same choice again. It's not like I chose it once 20 years ago and now I can't get off the train.
Heck, I think every once in a while I pick the 10 flare day.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, not a 30 flare day.
But there are days where I'm like, nope, I don't have that today. I'm going to hide in my office and just type things because I don't have it. And the thing is that on the scale of all of this, I think it brings up a lot of interesting issues about culture, about personality fit with culture, and about how you quantify and how you coach.
I was just saying,
attitude.
How do you lead
attitude?
Because attitude is not value and mission.
No.
Attitude is actually the implementation of value and mission.
We call it catitude.
Catitude? Oh my gosh, that's
because
awesome.
That's who we are, and that's ridiculous. Now that I say it out loud, I'm like, that's dumb. But at the same time, I think it's adorable.
It kind of sounds like it might come from Batman. Or Catwoman. I right away thought of Catwoman. I'm like, oh, it's Catwoman's attitude. Catitude.
Well, but the point is that how do you quantify it? And when you're making it a part of somebody's performance review or making it a part of your coaching with them, how do you really quantify it? How do you say to yourself, okay, I don't care the number of pieces of flair somebody has, but I expect somebody to be excited about the flair. I expect somebody to be interested and engaged in the flair. I expect somebody to be picking flair based on their personalities, because the point of the flair is to start conversations between a server and the people at the table. That's the point of the flair, is to make the server more...
It's a gateway conversation.
Yeah, it's a gateway conversation.
It's a conversation starter. My gosh, imagine how great that would be at some networking events if you were walking around with 15 pieces of flair.
Right. So imagine this conversation between a manager and an employee, not about 15 pieces of flair, but about how she approaches the flair.
So put that in the context of, like, because we wouldn't talk in flair.
No.
You don't have flair there.
Well,
so
I like flair.
Yeah, but I have not seen your employees wandering around with flair.
I don't have flair.
No. And I could see your employees revolting on a high level to flair.
Okay, so here's a great example. Have what we call a gratitude jar, where everybody can put in, like, we have a little piece of paper next to it, and everybody can put in something that they're grateful for about somebody else, anonymously, so that we have things that we can go back to. We can read things. People have their little gratitude things that have been about them, and they can look at them. Okay. Some people really actively engage in the gratitude jar. Some people they write things down. They put things in there frequently. And some of those people are leaders and some of them are not.
Right. But it's in their wheelhouse.
It's how they like to do things.
Yes, yeah. Got it.
And others don't. Yeah. They just don't. They don't think about it. They don't really value the pieces of paper when they're given to them. It's not just that they don't engage in it for other people. They don't engage in it for themselves either.
Right.
It's just not their thing.
It's not their thing.
Fair. And so we don't in any way have expectations or mandates around the gratitude jar.
That's good. Yeah.
Like, we do remind people that it's there because it's easy in the hustle and bustle to forget about it.
Yep.
We remind people it's there, and we have the little piece of paper are really differently and brightly colored, and we have a few at everybody's desk.
Nice.
So that you have easy access to do it when you're thinking about it.
Yep.
But that's it.
That's the extent of it.
That's the extent of it. And you know what? Some people never put anything in there. And some people never get anything out of there.
Yeah.
And some people don't care that they never get anything out of there.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all, like, this is all employee driven. It's all employee led. It's not something I set up. It's not something I created. It's just there.
So if you wanted to culturally make that wrong, or like mess with it, you'd actually put measurables on it.
Right.
If I part of the review, you've not filled out any gratitude.
Yeah. I would change the sheet so it was like who it was from. We would tally how many people did gratitude for how many other people. Have you expressed gratitude for every one of your coworkers in the last 6 months? Right? Like, we would put measurables and mandates around the gratitude jar. And then it becomes not a gratitude jar.
No.
Right? Doesn't that ruin it?
Not just that. What's the attitude behind?
Right. It's about generously giving and taking a minute when you're thinking about it to write something down about somebody, instead of thinking to yourself, oh, I have to remember to tell them, and then never doing it. That's all it's about. Some people would prefer to tell somebody directly.
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that.
I know part of the pieces of flair.
Yeah.
Also, I know one organization at the time, you earned flair.
Oh God.
Oh yeah, it turned out bad. They got sued.
Of course they did.
They did. It was bad. But I always found that kind of interesting too. Like you earned flair. And so now it was a measurable with outside the organization and inside the organization.
Yeah, no.
And that became a really, and culturally, like the employees, when they testified about some of the things, they talked about feeling an immense amount of pressure.
You know, I'm starting to think about workplace culture in a way that Margaret Mead talks about anthropology.
Yeah.
Like if you, I mean, there's a, I'm forgetting what it's called right now. We'll maybe have to look it up and do a future podcast on it. But there is a scientific fallacy that talks about if you are observing a phenomenon, your act of observing the phenomenon shifts the phenomenon, right?
Like Jane Goodall observing
Jane Goodall observing the apes shifts the apes behavior
because she's in their environment.
Right. She's there and there's no way around it. Her presence changes everything that they do. And so if she's looking at what do they do, how can she observe it without her presence? Or without the evidence of her presence, right? Like a scent or, leave behinds or right. And I kind of think about workplace culture like that. Every time I get involved with intention, I screw it up. Well, because you're trying to shift something, you're trying to row something, you're trying to lead something, and you're doing that actively. But at the same time, nothing in human behavior really turns out the way that we plan it to. Other people will react to things in ways that we can't predict. And when you're talking about group dynamics, it's massively complicated. So if I, with all good intentions, said, I'd really like everybody to put something in the gratitude jar this week, I would actually create resentment. And the people who got those gratitudes would feel like they weren't really real because I had forced it. Right.
Because you have all these different personality types. And so they would hear that information and interpret it.
Yeah. And some of them would see the intent before they would see anything else, which is that it's been sitting empty for a while and maybe we need to put a little bit more effort into it. And some of them would resent the intent. Like, are you kidding me? I've got enough to do. Why are you assigning me gratitude for my team members? I'm grateful for them every day. So
am I supposed to lie?
Right. Am I just supposed to make stuff up? Like I'm busy. I'm not watching what so-and-so is doing to be grateful for something that they're done. Like, what am I supposed to do? Talk about her shoes?
Or I could see some pressure. I'm going to let you finish the sentence. Or I could see some immense pressure from the hyperachievers.
Oh, totally. Like, to do it perfectly and right.
Okay. Like, how did you want us to write this out?
Yeah. And none of that would be intended. Anxiety. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. None of that would be intended. So every time, even with good intentions, I insert with intention, even though the intention's good, I unwittingly create problems. So I'm really feeling like that things like this is about the hiring process. Is about your process around one-on-one time, not reviews, but one-on-one time, the kind of leadership you support, the kind of engagement that you create room for.
Yes.
So creating room for projects to fail, creating room for research and development, creating room for mistakes, creating the space for these things to happen so that people feel like they can happen, and then they loosen up and calm down and just get it done.
And then have the conversation
about
the learning that's happening during the process.
Like, we're not going to say we value education. We're going to take time out to do professional development education on a consistent basis.
Yes.
So all of those things, showing and not telling. And when you think about this concept of 15 pieces of flair, it's all about telling, not showing. It's all about a corporation with best intentions saying, this is the attitude we want, and here's a measurable that we can use to filter down through 6 layers of management into a franchise. So that each franchisee can then have 3 layers of management, and then every single employee has to have 15 pieces of flair.
Yeah.
Bare minimum.
Yep. And the translation on that is not, you probably you don't get what you're looking for.
And here's the thing.
And maybe in a franchise you do, but each manager, again, it needs
Here's
to
the
be
thing.
modified.
In the course of Office Space, she leaves that job.
Which everybody knows, like, when you see that scene, that's where that's
where that's going.
Yeah, you totally
Like somebody
know.
in that scene just needs to call it because
Yep.
it's not going anywhere. So she leaves that job. She goes somewhere that has, frankly, similar food, similar price point, similar everything, but has a corporate attitude of more professionalism, more distance, less conversation table side. It's a different vibe, and it's a vibe that matches her vibe.
And it really does start with leadership. If you're running your company, it's how you're leading, and it's your actions.
And the actions create the vibe.
Yeah.
There's a brand vibe in that with the two restaurants that's intentionally different.
Yep.
But the actions create that vibe. And so hiring then becomes about matching a person to a vibe. Here's something else I want to talk about attitude though, and flair.
Yes.
I want to make sure that we talk about this because attitude, this concept of performance review based on attitude, and the fact that when you don't have measurables, it does become very subjective, which means it's an excellent place for unconscious bias to hide.
Oh, expand that. Can you expand on that a little
Oh
more?
gosh. I think for anybody who is a person of color listening, or anybody with a neurodivergence or a disability listening, has had a conversation with a manager about attitude. Yes. You've had a conversation about a manager about attitude when you've been 10 minutes late. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're pissy conversations.
Oh yeah. I literally have a performance review, by the way, that says I'm too happy.
Right.
I have a performance review somewhere
completely
in the world
ridiculous
that somebody wrote about me that said you are too perky and too happy and you come to work too energetic and we don't know what to do with you each day. And I remember smiling and going, I'm not going to be able to change that.
That's a terrifying.
I was just like, I'm not going to be able to change that. I can try and tone it down.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can't. I'll go work in the truck for a while.
And here's the thing. Unconscious bias is insidious. It's disgusting. It's all of these things, but it is also unconscious. So you have to, as a leader, you have to investigate your unconscious bias in order to unpack your unconscious bias. You have to dig. You have to look for it. You have to find it. You have to work against it. You have to educate. You have to read. You have to learn. Grow. You have to get uncomfortable with your bias so that you can deal with it. And it's never going to go away completely. Right. And it's not just about racism or homophobia or misogyny. It's not just about that. It's also about things like extroverted versus introverted.
Yes.
People pick leaders from those who speak up in meetings. Well, the best idea that introverts ever have is going to come out in a one-to-one or even an email.
Yep.
Because they're never going to speak up in a large group. That doesn't mean that they don't have the skills and abilities to be a leader.
And you need to arm yourself with that kind of knowledge. And I was going to tell you, one of the ways I've found to uncover that unconscious bias, that's literally in leadership coaching.
Yeah.
It really is, because before you have those reviews, you do talk to somebody else outside of your brain.
Yeah.
And you talk about, this is the number one thing I feel like they're struggling with. And what's really interesting, a lot of the times, it might not have anything to do with them. It might be the fact you don't know how to best lead that type of personality. Right. It might be with the fact you're just uncomfortable with that and not sure how to have that conversation.
Well, and it's why we do 360 reviews. So everybody reviews everybody else. Mm-hmm. And then that person's supervisor or close enough.
Yeah.
Kind of coordinates all of those reviews into, and some of them conflict, but there's a story in the conflict, right? So if you are maybe in a middle management role and people kind of who are underneath you say one set of things kind of universally, and people who are above you say another, if your leader is really looking at that, they're seeing a pattern that is telling.
Yes.
If there's a really sharp divide in experience between your direct reports, there's something there that's telling. And so it's not just about the content of the 360-degree reviews, but the patterns that emerge from asking everybody the same questions about somebody else.
Yeah, I can really see the value in having that.
Of course, the team's really young, which means, we're still learning how to do them.
Right.
But at the same time, they're still tremendously valuable even with that.
Well, I'll throw out an additional tool because right now I'm in that Dare to Lead Brené Brown training.
Yeah.
Okay. And literally this last week was about feedback.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yes. And she has a great, Google this. She has a great how to give feedback list. It's got 11 points to it. And it's really, really like,
really good.
She's spot on. Yeah.
Really good.
About how to approach one. Yeah. It's just really, really good. So that would be my recommendation because
we'll have to link it.
Yeah. You go into any review and everybody, even that 360 thing, everybody's kind of thought about that aspect of it.
Right.
You're going to really create that better foundation, that culture. Those are the actions. Like, as
they're the things that show.
Yes.
Like, I value your opinion so much that I'm asking you to review my job performance.
Yeah.
I'm making it a part of your job to review my job performance.
And that's big.
And that's telling. That's showing. And I'm not dictating how you do it, when you do it. Well, maybe when a little bit, but how you do it or what you say. There's conversation around individual things, but each individual is like packaged into a whole. So I never really see, I could look if I wanted to, but I kind of don't want to. The individual pieces of feedback, I look at what our operations director thinks is the pattern out of all of the feedback. And so I see it filtered, which is, I think, incredibly important because that filter is what allows us to see the larger patterns in that information. And get out of our own egos in order to see something bigger than us.
So to wrap up and pull together, I want to talk about that review process that you do and kind of like put together some of the steps of that before we go. And then I also just want to point out, so what we're saying is you can have the best intention by having some kind of measurable about attitude, like flair. That was our example. Don't do it.
No.
And terrible. And hope we've talked you out of it. And next time you see people that are maybe having to wear flair, you can sympathize with them and say, you know what, flair doesn't work for you. Like, I have a great place. Like, I have a niece that's a server, and she said she gets more job offers for like a variety of businesses and stuff because she's really, really good at her job. Really good at it. And so people see that and they just hand her, but they're like, if you ever want to leave the serving world, they're like, we would be happy. So
but it's because she's happy and a good fit.
She is. And
that doesn't mean that she would be that everywhere else.
Yes.
And that's our point. Our point is that your brand, your leadership style has intention. And so culture kind of drives from that. And that means that if your leadership style is a command control authoritarian leadership style, then you're going to attract people who feel most secure in that space.
And they might not
then feel or want to or be incentivized to add to your ideation process or add their own thoughts or opinions to yours, because that's not being incentivized. That's not the expectation. So if you say that that's the expectation or you want that to be the expectation, then what you need to change is your own style, not them. It's not about their pieces of flair or how many they've had. It's about, did you make it exciting to pick them out of the bucket?
Oh, nice.
So look at that.
Nice.
You know, the other thing I noticed in that scene,
the
manager's not wearing any flair.
I did notice that. See, now you're going to have to Google this, and I'm sure there's a YouTube video that has just that.
Oh yeah, you can just watch the pieces of flair scene.
Yeah.
We'll probably link it in the description because it's not,
before we go, I want to, so the way your 360 review works.
I think we should do a whole separate podcast.
Oh yeah, you got to catch the next podcast because you're right. It would be more.
It's more, and we want to keep this under 25 minutes, and we're at 24:30 literally right now. So I was super excited about doing that for like 10 seconds.
Nice job.
So thank you so much for listening to If These Heels Can Talk. We hope that this has helped incentivize you to watch a movie from the late 90s starring Jennifer Aniston. No, is that not what we hope?
No, we kind of hope that they've learned about culture and about leadership.
Yes. And all those things.
And had a good laugh.
Have a great day.